In reading your editorial and in preparing for this interview, you said something that I was completely unaware of, and maybe it's a good idea, that basketball used to be played in a cage. Tell me about the cage.
Well, first of all, it was only professional basketball. Professional basketball was a much different game from college basketball and high school basketball in the early part of the century. It was a game that was played more by lower class, working class people. It was a much rougher game, and in many cases, it was sponsored by either companies or ethnic groups or towns to engender a feeling of pride in that particular company or ethnic group or town. So the games were played often for blood, and they got a lot of that. It was not unusual to have people knocked unconscious in games, the players, sometimes the referee, but less often. And early in the century, probably about 1900, there might have been instances of the cages being used before that, but early in the century, in the New York State League, which was a well-known professional league in the early part of the century, Ed Wachter, one of the founders of the league, decided that they would put the game in a cage, and it caught on, and pretty soon all professional basketball in all leagues in the early part of the century was being played in a cage, largely a heavy steel wire cage to keep the ball in play, to keep the game going. The ball was live off the cage, people could run off the cage, and it meant that the games would be much faster. There were no timeouts because the ball went out of bounds, and it also protected the players from very rabid fans.
Well, something that we have run into very recently is the very rabid fan and the very rabid player, and the twain did meet.
Indeed.
And you know, maybe it's time to put the cage back up, or is that's never going to happen?
It's not. The cage was removed in order to get more intimacy between the players and the fans, and to make it seem as if the game was not going to be marked by that kind of distance, both artificial and in this case real. So basketball became more intimate, and people came to the game and could yell and scream, but they kept their distance for the most part. There were instances when players would fight among themselves. That was not uncommon still, and there were some instances when coming on or off the court, the fans would still harass the players, sometimes physically, but for the most part, there were no instances similar to what we just saw, that is, where players would storm into the stands or fans would storm onto the court. There were a few instances we could come up with that were rare, nothing as well developed as the recent incidents.
So there was this trusting period for a while where the professional athletes were exposed to the fans, and now it seems that we're back to where we were. And what happened? How did this transpire?
Well, it wasn't immediate. So I think over time we've seen fans feel that they're more a part of the game, that their participation is an integral part of their team winning and losing. And players, of course, encourage the fans, and when they sweep their arms up and down, get the volume up, and they want fans to be more involved in that sense. We see players leaping into stands in football games, and I think fans have felt that they should be more a part of the game. And in this instance, for whatever reason, and I'm sure more things will come out that'll give us some idea of what those instances and events were, caused that artificial barrier that people seem to believe in to be broken, and fans got much more involved. Now, obviously, having a player in the stands was a significant part of that, but affecting that was the fans tossing things on the player. That's happened in other times too.
They do that. They do that all the time, and they're chucking chairs, they're chucking cups,
batteries.
Is there not a point where the professional athlete has the right, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, has the right to walk up and pop someone in the mouth who's doing that to him?
Well, I'd say it has to be no. I think they have to rely on security. They have to rely on people, other fans, and security removing people from the game. I think if you get fans or players going into the stands, then there are no rules anymore, that the game is no longer entertainment. The game is kind of scary, and we saw some people in the stands who were clearly upset, little kids crying, old people who were hurt. There can't be any time when players enter the stands. It just can't happen.
This is like, if you remember the movie with James Caan, Rollerball. I mean, it really has almost gotten to, no, they're not intentionally killing people out there, but it has really gotten out of hand. And there are people like me, I will not go to a professional football game. It's that unpleasant. And I can see why I couldn't go to a professional basketball game. And it's almost, why would a child even be there? Because this is not the first time this type of thing has happened.
No, there was. Vernon Maxwell did this a few years ago for Houston. But basketball games are on the edge and have kind of pushed themselves in that direction. If you go to a professional game, there's always noise. The volume's up, there's more commercialism, and what we see from various commercials is to be more involved and to be louder. And during timeouts, there's no longer a downtime. It seems to accelerate the kind of tension that there is in the game. And as I said, fans feel that they're a part of that contest, and maybe fueled by alcohol, maybe just because they get carried away and they want their team to win and they think they're helping, they get more involved.
Is there anything we can do? Can we pull back at all and get civility back in professional sports?
I think there are a number of things that have to be done from different parties. First, there has to be, unfortunately, more security. Second, there has to be more schooling of players. A lot of players come into the league and have not spent as much time in college, for example, have jumped from high school into professional sports. Even college players, in many cases, have gone through time as players feeling coddled and feeling privileged, and in fact they are.
They are.
And they believe that they can do whatever they want. I don't think they have made enough efforts in professional sports to get their players to understand what their role is in these kind of instances, because it was exceptional. There are often some times when a commissioner of some particular sport will say this is unacceptable, and that's it. Mm-hmm. But I think they probably need efforts in training camps to say these are the rules that we're going to follow, and these are the kind of things you can expect, and here's the response that we expect. There isn't as much time spent on that because it doesn't seem to have been needed before.
Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
A copy of the program you've just seen can be purchased through Penn State Media Sales at mediasales.psu.edu or by calling 800-770-2111.